You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. We're happy to be joined by Nassau County Legislator Steve Rhoads. Now, Steve has represented the 19th Legislative District in Nassau County's legislature since 2015, encompassing portions of Freeport, Merrick, North Merrick, Belmore, Wantaw, and Seaford. Well, thank you for joining us today. I know you're busy, I'm sure, as always, but great to have you on the show, and we really thank you for putting the time aside to come and talk to us.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Bill. I appreciate it.
Anytime you want to talk, this is the place. This is where you come back and
be careful. I may take you up on that.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay.
We're all ears.
We always like to hear from the newsmakers. You know, you guys are on the front line doing it, so we get the skinny from right from the source.
Exactly.
But anyway.
Mm-hmm. Let's start. Yeah, okay, Bill. Let's start then, like we tend to want to start with new guests who we haven't had on yet before, discussing your personal experiences of governing during the peak of the pandemic. Knowing that we still are going through it, but thankfully we're in a better place now. So we just wanted to get your thoughts on how that's been for you and your family.
Well, I've got to say that for myself and my family, my wife actually owns a small business that was closed for 3 months, so it was a difficult situation for many small businesses, but more importantly, a difficult situation for many families and many individuals. I had a family member of my own, fortunately, survived COVID, but was hospitalized between the hospital and the rehab facility for 280 days. This was something not to be trifled with. And I've got to give a tremendous amount of credit to Larry Eisenstein, who is Nassau County's health commissioner. He's the one who really coordinated the county's response to this. And he did, and his team did a tremendous job, between getting information out to the public, making sure that people had access to testing, which, it seems now that's commonplace, but as we were early on in the pandemic, that was difficult.
Definitely
making sure that information got to other leaders in government, so we could understand what was happening. And now with respect to vaccine distribution, he was incredibly instrumental in helping us get Nassau Community College open as a vaccination site. The Yes We Can Community Center. We were able to get the Nassau Coliseum open as a vaccination site, and he and his team have been working long hours, making sure, trying to put us in the best possible position to have a full recovery from COVID and try and keep people safe, which ultimately is our main responsibility, and we're seeing that. On our end, we were trying to put out community updates at the height of the pandemic. You may have seen on Facebook my little videos that we were doing, trying to get information out there. The response has been truly amazing, and it's a credit to everyone wearing their masks, social distancing, trying to avoid large gatherings. And now, it's a credit to people who are going out there and making the decision that they're going to go out and get vaccinated. That ultimately is going to be what winds up enabling us to turn the corner on this. And, we now know that at least, I believe it's 40% of Nassau County residents have had at least one vaccine. We have just under 25% now who are fully vaccinated, who have had both doses. And, we'll see what's going to happen with Johnson & Johnson. But as more vaccine becomes available, hopefully more people will make the choice to get it. And, hopefully we'll, by the summertime, be able to return to at least some sort of normal summer, which I think we're all looking forward to. We have a lot to be, there's a lot to be said about with all the losses that we've had and the losses of life are tragic. But it is amazing to see how many people came together to help people through the pandemic. both in terms on the medical side, but also in terms of, how the communities came together to respond. PPE drives and support for our first responders, groups that formed to make sure that we could send food to hospital workers and grocery workers, to make sure that they had something when they were working those long hours. So, like every tragedy, the worst of times brings out the best in people, and we really had the opportunity to see that display, and hopefully that will continue.
Yeah. Well, we certainly found out because of the pandemic who some important workers were that we didn't necessarily hold in high esteem before this. People stocking grocery shelves, truck drivers with the supply lines. I think that was a wake up call for a lot of us to say, I don't need an actor and I don't need that, but I do need that guy to put cans on the shelves, because when I went to the supermarket, there were no beans left or whatever,
Right. We've got a different perspective on who our heroes are at this point.
Bingo. And the other thing that John and I, talking to, different people during the time, is that, I want to keep saying it, that the kids in school, I think, should be on the heroes list. Because our perception when this first happened is that schools were going to be the festering, this disease laden. Yeah, and it did not happen. Those. I mean, you got to hand it to them. How do you keep a mask on a second grader? But they did it, and they really followed the rules.
Absolutely.
Props to the teachers as well. And, we've talked about it, with the Commissioner Eisenstein and others. And I guess it maybe has to do somewhat with the fact that the students are a little bit more used to a structured environment. The young kids, they're kind of used to nap time and, follow the teacher's directions. So, yeah, certainly every chance we get to commend them, knowing that they make the difference for these types of situations, we certainly will take. But yeah, just to your point, Steve, Legislator Rhoads, that, it seemed that a lot of... Yep. There we go. But for a lot of electeds, it really was a test of capacity, and just seeing, that like you said, so many other constituent service issues, whether it was the food insecurity issue, all these issues came to the forefront. And it was great to see, bipartisan, again, just support, whether it's blood drives or whether it's, the testing efforts, whatever it may be, realizing that regardless of anything, we all care about our communities. And like you said, whether it's the teacher or it's the employee at your local supermarket, that we're all in it together. So it certainly, like you said, shows some of those positive things along with a lot of those dark realities that we're glad to see that we're, at least, mostly hopefully behind us. And like you said, hopefully going to have a good news summer. So with that, let's maybe transition, because like you said, we are now more towards the recovery process. And I know you, along with other folks that we've spoken, like your colleague, Legislator Ferretti, are very staunch advocates, along with others, Clevin, the town supervisor, and folks, for pushing for businesses to be able to open, and to have less restrictions, but also to get the funding and the support they need to recover from these things. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that and why you think that's so important, that part of the calculation or equation?
Well, absolutely. And when you're talking about businesses specifically, we had the opportunity through CARES Act funding that we received from the federal government. Nassau County received about $103 million. And one of the differences that we've had with the administration is that out of that $103 million, about $98 million was spent on salaries and benefits for Nassau County employees that would have been covered through the county budget otherwise. And when it came to light in January that we actually had a $78 million surplus, according to the administration, it sort of led us to question, well, we could have used that $78 million that we now have that was used for salaries and benefits to provide rental assistance to families, mortgages assistance to families. We could have provided direct assistance to food banks. We could have opened additional testing sites. There's a lot we could have done with that money. And we want to make sure that with the approximately $400 million that Nassau County is going to be receiving from the federal government as part of this latest stimulus package, we want to make sure that that money is used correctly and is providing direct assistance to food banks, is providing direct assistance to families, is helping businesses be able to get back on their feet. right? Because, not a lot of our, and I've got that personal experience now with my own family. Most of those mom and pop businesses, which creates 70% of the jobs in this country, don't have 3 months worth of savings that they can just shut their doors. Those expenses, their expenses continue. They still had to keep the lights on. They had to pay rent. They had to, that stuff.
Very
continues.
tight margins.
Right. Exactly. So we want to make sure that we're providing them direct assistance. We have to look at the number of job losses. Now, the economy is starting to come back, obviously, in Nassau County. We see that through our sales tax revenue, which there was a projection that we were going to be down by about 20% last year. It turned out to be under 8%. The projection for this year is that we're going to have fairly close to a normal year, at least based on what it's looking like now. We want to make sure that we're helping along with the job recovery process. We need to get our people back to work. And part of that is making sure that businesses are open, that business is being done, that transactions are happening, and making sure that we're providing opportunities for people to enjoy and to spend.
Right.
Spend money locally. Exactly.
And spend locally, which ultimately is what drives our economy. So, we're in a unique position. The county has well-documented financial woes, but we have these additional funds now that are coming in, and we've got to make sure that they're used properly to provide the kind of help that our communities need to be able to spring back to life as we pull out of this pandemic.
Yeah, I think I think everyone can agree with seeing more support come to these local businesses, like you said, that have weathered through hopefully the worst of the storm and not getting back up on their feet, can use a little bit of that assistance, and seeing whether it's from the newest round of federal stimulus or the state budget, which is able to allocate some additional money out to Long Island. That hopefully, like you said, people are able to get that in a reasonably accessible way. I know there's issues. People talk about the PPP, kind of SBA program being a bit difficult to navigate. But, I know people like you and other legislators have these kind of webinars trying to explain, with SBA, maybe reps, how do you do that exactly? And like you said, just getting information. So because the programs might be there, but if you're a small, maybe first generation immigrant business, you might not know how in the world to actually access that. I know there's the one that Bill's very interested in as a performer. The venues and other kind of rebates that we see that are hopefully going to be coming. I know James Medora, I believe, from Newsday had an update about that going live again Saturday after some initial hiccups. But like you said, there are these policy prescriptions that legislators are taking that hopefully will make that difference. So that's great to hear. And
perhaps,
go ahead.
Perhaps we might consider providing some tax relief for a change. Would be wonderful.
Yeah, no, it is that constant battle where, we need the revenue, but at the same time, like you said, at moments like this, certainly, we can get into the assessment conversation in a little while, but certainly we want to make sure that if people can avoid having that additional burden, it certainly is as good a time as ever to limit that. So,
absolutely.
Okay.
No question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's just remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC with Bill McIntyre and myself, Jon Gallo, and we are happy again to be joined by Steve Rhoads, Nassau County's legislator. Bill, what else, I guess, are you thinking right now in terms of, that kind of discussion in terms of the reopening and those concerns about, making sure it's done in the best way possible?
Yeah. It is difficult. I don't, I think we're all going to get vaccinated, but I don't think things are going to change that much. Certainly not right away. It's a tough question. There are places that are set up to be able to, let people perform by having cameras in their clubs, and maybe it's either an online thing, so people are home. So it's wanting to get back to where we came from, where you have a big crowd of people in front of you as you're getting ready to play. And I don't know when that's really going to be a viable thing. The other thing that I think all restaurants and venues are dealing with is capacity, what they're allowed to, how many they're allowed to let in. And I certainly couldn't tell. I'm not a financial guy, but somebody can look at that right away and kind of let them know that, you won't survive at 50%. At least not for long.
No.
I'm kind of jazzed by what you said about, we thought there was going to be like a 24% tax shortfall and it was only 8%. And I'm
Correct.
thinking, what made that up? I mean, is that takeout dinners? Because, that seemed to be the only thing that really blossomed, and it was sad for a lot of restaurants because they were not set up to do that. They're like fine dining. They're not really set up to put their meals in a box and hand them out. You know what I mean? As far as a takeout thing. So a lot of them, they had to do a lot of, juggling to figure out how to get a meal to somebody that could just come and pick it up.
Grubhub and all those apps having to navigate that and the fees and things like that. It's a lot to figure out.
Yeah. But I guess a thing like Grubhub is a cottage industry. I guess you could call it that. And they took advantage of this, which is great. I mean, that's how the free market works, right? You see a niche and you fill it. But
you're absolutely right. And you saw a lot. You saw, in our businesses, you saw a lot of ingenuity. In our restaurants, you saw them transitioning to things that they never did before. Takeout windows, for example, where you can just walk up and get your. A lot of local places wound up doing that. A lot of our local businesses boosted their online presence that they might not have had before, so that they could continue to do business even though their doors were closed. We're talking about the performing arts, though, and places like my own local community, Brokerage Comedy Club. For example,
there you go.
There's somebody that there's nothing they could do. And even now it's difficult because even when you got, as to your point, Bill, when you got permission to open at, I believe it was 33% capacity.
Right.
You can't make a go of it at 33% capacity in that type of business. And so, effectively they've been shut now for, 15 months. And they're going to need some assistance to be able to reopen. Because it's going to
I know that
some time before we can get back to normal.
Yeah, when it first happened, I felt bad for the restaurants that and diners, because they went out and spent money and put up plexiglass dividers, and they did all of these things to try to make a go of it. But then the rules changed, and now a guy had just invested 10, 20 grand to have this all done, and he turns around and nope, can't have him in. That was.
But we did talk to. Yeah. True. But we did talk to the town of Oyster Bay supervisor, Joseph Saladino, last week, and we talked to others. And, speaking to the rebate programs, but thankfully, local governments realized that, like I said, with the changing rules, certain things like that could be afforded with maybe some of that additional kind of revenue to be, again, reimbursed for. So like you said, definitely, Steve, there's a lot of adaptation, there's a lot of creativity that has happened. And that's again, one of those positive kind of silver linings out of a difficult time for a lot of these industries. Go ahead if you have more thoughts on this, but we do want to switch over to the tax assessment issue too after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, right.
I was going to say, even on the part of local governments, in terms of restaurants specifically, transitioning to outdoor dining. Which is required, usually town code amendment or waivers to be able to allow that to happen, because that generally didn't. A lot of those restaurants were able to survive because they were able to set up tents in their parking lots, which they were never able to do before. They were able to set up, tables on sidewalks, which they were never able to do. And that, at least, even though they were limited, obviously, as far as indoor dining, at least they were able to open up outside, and it helped them get past this, to the point where now hopefully we'll be able to open up further. Now, you want to tackle assessment, huh?
I mean, I know it's something that you certainly don't mind talking about, and I know it's a long conversation.
How long is your show? This is a 2-hour show, right?
Exactly, right? Right. Will definitely have to pick it up, I'm sure, along the way some other time. But I guess just to get into it, from the kind of, eye in the sky view, we know that there's been a lot of issue, we'll just say, with the assessment process for a while, and clearly, there's been a lot of confusion for the average taxpayer. We've talked about it from both the county executive to, like we said, Legislator Ferretti, and a lot of others who have very different points of view on it, of course. But at the bottom end, or at the bottom line, rather, when we talk to Scott Eidler, who reports on these issues and is very capable of understanding minutiae and all this, kind of had to just admit that, it's tough to explain. It's difficult. It's arcane tax statutes. And to that point, I know that there was, I think, a new kind of publication that was put out, but still kind of didn't necessarily clear everything up. So do you want to just talk about, why you believe so strongly, I guess, what you believe in terms of the assessment kind of being bungled and what needs to be done to rectify it, basically?
Sure. I mean, the main issue as far as taxpayers are concerned, separate and apart from the accuracy of the assessment itself, was the decision to bypass taxpayer protections in the real property tax law. So state law says that you can't raise somebody's assessed value more than 6% in a year or 20% over a 5-year period of time. And by dropping the level of assessment, which is sort of now we're going to get into the weeds real quick, which is sort of a multiplying factor by which they take the value of your home, they multiply it by the level of assessment, and that's how they determine your ultimate assessed value. By dropping that level of assessment, the assessed value is the one that's capped at that 620. So if I drop the multiplying factor by 60%, I've artificially deflated the assessed value, which then buys me room to then raise it so that I can meet my new assessed value. So by doing that, which is something that the administration promised they would not do, they bypass those state taxpayer protections for 95% of Nassau County homeowners. And so when these new tax bills came out, and again, separate and apart from the accuracy issues, which is a whole other topic that we can talk about.
Of course.
When homeowners are seeing 10, 20, 30, I spoke to a homeowner in Wantagh not too long ago. In fact, it was reported on, his taxes went from $10,000 a year to $31,500
Wow.
a year. By bypassing those tax caps and by leaving new construction, for example, or what was important in my district, Superstorm Sandy construction, leaving them out of the 5-year phase-in, that's what's causing these enormous tax increases that are putting homeowners under tremendous pressure to be able to stay into their homes. I spoke to a gentleman, again in Wantagh, whose home burnt down in 2018, rebuilt his house, put back the same exact house. His taxes went from about $10,500 to almost $26,000. He's got to sell his house now because he can't afford to stay in the community. So, that's been the real impact. Newsday's reported 65% of homeowners across the county receive tax increases as a result of the reassessment. Reassessment is something that should be about 50-50, right? You would figure half would go up, half would go down, right? We're talking about the size of the pie. And just to give your listeners a little example, I always use examples of food because, well, if I stood up, you could see I love pizza. So.
Always relatable.
There you go. So when we talk about the universe of taxes, all the money that's collected by the county, state, the county, the town, school districts, fire districts, water districts, if you happen to be lucky enough not to have New York American Water, that makes up the size of the pizza pie. The assessment system is just how big your slice of the pie is going to be, right?
Okay.
So when we're talking about how the pie is divided, if you're just shifting how big each individual slice is, the pie stays the same size. So when you see large shifts in assessment responsibility, when we're talking about in a community like Belmore and Merrick, where almost 75% of homeowners got tax increases, only 25% got decreases, and then look at communities on the North Shore where those numbers were, in many instances, reversed, you tend to wonder about the fairness and accuracy of the system. And then on top of that, the failure to provide accurate information to taxpayers. For example, the administration put out a strategic communications plan, a plan for 30 some odd community meetings that were going to be held in the summer of 2018 when the reassessment first got started, town hall meetings so that they could explain to homeowners how the reassessment was going to be conducted, how they were going to determine the value of your house, how a homeowner could actually protect themselves, what the process was if you disagreed with the valuation on your home. Not a single one of those meetings ever took place. And they were scheduled, dates, time, places. Not a single one of them ever happened. So that was sort of the precursor for what we've seen now, in terms of us as a legislature having to force the administration to send out tax impact notices, having to force the administration to put information on the website. Legislator Ferretti and I actually, we passed a bill back in December. There was 5-year phase-in information that was on the county's website so that homeowners would be able to see what the impact was going to be on their bills moving forward so that they could plan if they were going to grieve or not. When tax bills came out in October 2020, that information was pulled off the website. We sponsored legislation to put it back on. 30 days later, that wasn't there. We wound up having to bring a lawsuit in Nassau County Supreme Court to force the administration to put the information back on there. So it's been a battle, and I know that the county executive is attempting to fix the problem, but in fixing the problem, we seem to have, made it worse. But we've committed the cardinal sin of not being transparent with the public so that they could explain, so that we could explain and they could understand what was happening at each step of the process. And that's something that we've been battling back and forth over.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining it from your perspective, of course. Obviously, we will have to continue this conversation another time because certainly, like you said, it is a dense subject and definitely merits more conversation. But let's just remind our listeners, they all listen to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and we still are joined by Steve Rhoads, county legislator, for just a few more moments here in closing. So just wanted to, again, just touch on just maybe a couple of yes or no's just in terms of our understanding and our listeners' understanding about where this process stands. There had been made those, I think, calculation ladders, that information. Is that now available? People can read that on county websites?
Well, the ladder report, strangely enough, was actually pulled down from the county website, which is something that we'll be addressing today at the legislature. So the ladder report by court order was supposed to be replaced with an upgraded ladder report, which would provide specific information and explanations for each of the items that are on the ladder.
I see.
So that information now was pulled off the website and was replaced by nothing.
Okay, so, again, so that's what you were referring to before. I see now. Okay, so and that. I see. Like I said, sorry, we probably won't get back into it another time. And then just another question, just in terms of the status of that whole process. There was a referendum vote, I believe, for an elected assessor, but that, my understanding was, didn't pass the veto-proof majority. Is that correct in the legislature?
Yeah, that's correct. We sponsored a referendum to go on November's ballot to let the voters choose whether or not they wanted an elected county assessor that answers to the administration, the appointed county assessor that answers to the administration, or an elected assessor that's accessible and accountable to them. Unfortunately, that was vetoed by the county executive, and we didn't have the votes to be able to override the veto. Since we voted short.
I understand. So I'm sure you guys in the Republican delegation will continue to fight for that position, and we'll certainly follow up with you about that down the road. We want to thank you for coming today.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to have that 2-hour conversation sometime soon.
Exactly. And just real quick, I just wanted to plug one event, at least that I know was coming up that your office is sponsoring. April 26th at 1 p.m., you're going to be a part of the Mill Pond cleanup, it looks like. Or actually, I'm sorry, is that the right? No, apologize. That's May 1st. May 1st, 9 a.m.
May 1st from 9 to 11:30, we've got Mill Pond cleanup. May 15th.
There's a household waste collection, right?
May 15th, we've got the Takapusha cleanup, and I believe on I believe it's May 26th, we actually have our prescription drug take back day, which will be that as well. So just check me out on Facebook or follow our webpage on the county legislature, and that will have all the information on all of these other events. So I appreciate John and Bill. I appreciate what you do in helping get information out there. It's always important to keep not just young people, but everybody engaged in the process, because ultimately they need to understand that what happens in government, really does impact their lives, and they need to make their voices heard and be a part of it. So I appreciate you helping in that effort.
Most definitely.
Well, we thank you for coming on and spending your time with us. We know you're busy.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And we always get our guests to promise they'll come back. So I think you will, right?
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. Be well.
Well, take care. Thanks.
Thanks again. Good stuff, Bill.
Maura McDermott from Newsday has joined us, and You wrote an interesting story about the kind of the real estate battles out there, the general public, and there is a big move on Long Island. I mean, the housing numbers have shot. Well, I'll let you tell the listening audience because you wrote the story. But thank you for being here, Maura. We appreciate it.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for having me, Bill and John. It's really nice to be here. So yeah, you are correct. The Long Island housing market, as home buyers and home sellers know, the Long Island housing market has been absolutely on fire lately.
Yeah.
And, one of the numbers that jumped out at us most from one of the most recent reports was that out of all the sales that closed in the first 3 months of this year, and, the first 3 months of the year are not normally a very hot housing market. It's, the winter, it's people who normally aren't really thinking so much about buying homes at that point. But competition was so fierce that of every 10 home sales, 4 of them actually ended up selling for prices that were higher than the last listing price. So that's a good indication that there were bidding wars in 4 out of 10 home sales. And those are numbers from the most recent report from the appraisal company Miller Samuel and the brokerage Douglas Elliman. They look at all the sales that happened in Nassau and Suffolk. And by the way, that includes all of Nassau and Suffolk except the East End. That is a pretty dramatic finding, right? 4 out of 10 home sales ending in bidding wars.
Yeah. And what are some of those main attributing factors that are kind of leading to this seller's market? And is it a lot have to do with the urban flight of the city, or what's your reporting saying that's causing this reality?
That's definitely a factor. As we all know, during the pandemic, people who have been living in New York City have been eager for more space, have been wanting to kind of explore homes in the suburbs. So we've had a big influx of buyers from New York City. But many observers and experts on the market say that an even bigger factor actually is these record low interest rates. I mean, the rate that you get for a 30-year mortgage these days is just barely over 3%. That's pretty much at historic lows. So that is taking a lot of people who have been thinking about buying and, maybe who've been renting, and they're saying, when I run the numbers, it's actually cheaper for me to buy a home than to keep renting. So that's prompting a lot of people to get in the market, and also people who maybe previously couldn't have qualified for a mortgage, once they run the numbers on their income and their debts and what have you. With interest rates this low, more folks can qualify for mortgages so they can buy homes. And also, more people are saying, these prices are very high, but when I look at my monthly payment, I can make it work. Even if I think that the price for this particular home is a little out of whack, with the interest rates this low, I can make it work. So in some ways, even though the flight from the city is what we're all noticing and talking about, it's really kind of the bread and butter issues like low interest rates and also the strengthening economy that are driving a lot of people into the housing market.
Fascinating. That makes sense. How you laid it out that way. And I know we've spoken with some of your colleagues talking about, trying to keep people in Long Island and keeping it affordable and trying to maintain these kind of urban centers. I think people speak to, Port Jefferson and other places where there's high walkability and people, want to move to. So it's good to see, like I said, it's not just, people, as the perception may be, in penthouses in Manhattan moving out to the Hamptons, but it is a lot of homeowners kind of moving across the island saying, I've been a renter for so long. If I'm going to pay this, like you said, maybe now is the time to just kind of jump deep end into it. So that's interesting.
I wonder, are the rentals and such in Manhattan, are those costs going down because of this competition or this situation?
Well, that is a really interesting question. The issues that are happening in New York City, the dynamics in New York City are certainly driving some of the dynamics in the Long Island real estate market. In this article, I didn't look specifically at the rental prices, in New York City. But what we did focus on in this article is, what's happening with the home prices on Long Island. And, a lot of people are saying that with prices where they're at on Long Island, even with these low interest rates, it still is a challenge getting into this market. So when you look at the median price for homes on Long Island, outside of the East End, for the first 3 months of this year, that median price was $525,000. So
that's the median price.
Yes, exactly. So half were lower than that and half were higher. And and you're not even looking at those Hamptons homes in that, or those North Fork homes in that. That's just the homes in Nassau County and Western Suffolk. So that's 17% higher than a year before. And a year before, the housing market was hot too. So that's really starting to get to the point that some home buyers are really having to, even taking into account these low interest rates, some home buyers are having to say, you know what, this is getting a little bit rich for my blood. There is certainly some concern about whether these prices are getting a little too hot. People are starting to ask questions like, is this a bubble? Now, what folks who have been observing this market for a long time, including through the last housing crash in the late 2000s, what folks are saying about that is that this is not the same scenario that we saw in the late 2000s, where you had such lax lending standards that people could pretty much just walk into a mortgage lender's office and, say, my income is, what I say it is. And the lender would make them a loan. You're not dealing with lax lending standards like that. You're not dealing with, distortions in the market caused by things like that. What we're dealing with here is very high demand, very low supply, which has something to do with the fact that some homeowners are reluctant to have people come into their homes, during a pandemic. They're worried about the health risks. And also, some people are saying, I'd like to trade up or trade down, but at this point, I don't know where I'd go to if I stay on Long Island. So what some folks are saying is that unless people are moving out of state, it's really hard to put your home on the market right now because it's hard to know where to move to.
I did see in a story that you reported, I believe around maybe the 15th, a little bit earlier than the most recent story, that there was a specific nonprofit, I believe, organization called Community Housing Innovations that was, I believe, kind of offering some kind of grant program for first-time home buyers who were maybe kind of low to moderate income. Can you talk a little bit more about how those play into the equation of trying to keep people on Long Island?
Absolutely. So Community Housing Innovations is one of the nonprofit groups that has programs like this. There are some other groups as well, including Community Development Corporation of Long Island Housing Partnership. There are a number of others. So what programs like this offer is, as a first-time home buyer, if you meet certain income limits, and the income limits, let's say for a family of 4, you could be looking at an income of about $113,000. And if you meet certain income limits and meet certain other requirements, what you can do is you can sign up for a program where you enroll in a free homebuyer education course. You can get all sorts of other help in terms of budgeting and amassing savings, learning about the home buying process. And you can qualify for grants, into the 5 figures, more than $20,000 in grants for closing costs, for repairs. And the way folks can find out about programs like this is by contacting those groups, or if you do an internet search for federally certified housing counseling groups. What you want is free counseling. You don't want to be paying for something through a private group. You want someone who's a federally certified housing counselor at a nonprofit group, and they can tell you all about these programs. They can be a big help to home buyers.
That's great. No, I'm sure a lot of our listeners, whether a young family or, someone who's been here a long time, like you said, that's struggling a little bit. If you can, I'd certainly recommend, Googling that, or we'll share out some of the information as well on social media. But let's just remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and again, thankfully, with Newsday reporter Maura McDermott. That makes a lot of sense. Like you said, that thankfully there is some funding for that. And I know a lot of that stuff is kind of first come, first serve, with those funding streams not always being that deep. So certainly, if you're interested, certainly recommend you do that as quickly as possible. Just another question, because I know in some of your reporting, you had kind of listed maybe 6 boom towns where we were maybe seeing the highest kind of, I don't know if it's growth or price kind of increases. So which ones were those specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fun story to do. So what we did was we took some data from Miller Samuel and Douglas Elliman, and we looked town by town. And we actually have a searchable database, so you can go onto Newsday's website and pull up your own community, see how prices are trending. And what we did was we looked at a number of communities. We wanted to look at communities in different geographic areas of Long Island, different price ranges. So we took a look at a number of communities. And what we found is that there are certain communities where prices are rising quite rapidly, and the number of sales is also up quite substantially. Now, one of the biggest increases is in Locust Valley. Now, that's, of course, north shore of Nassau County town, where, that's one of these communities where a lot of folks, a lot of affluent buyers are leaving New York City and, looking for these, spacious, luxurious homes, on the North Shore. So when you look at Locust Valley, what you see is these very, very dramatic rises in prices. Now, in Locust Valley, the median price is over $1 million.
Oh, my.
Once again, that means half of home sales closed for over $1 million. That was in the last year.
I'm familiar with some of Locust Valley, and some of the enclaves in there. There are estates that have 7 and 8 acres.
Absolutely.
So so the high end on that must be
absolutely
a little bit of a skewed data set.
Absolutely, but when you look at where the Locust Valley prices were a year before, the median price the year before was just under $570,000.
Really? Huh.
Wow.
So
that's a jump.
That's intense.
Yeah, really big jump. So we also took a look at Westbury. We took a look at Freeport, Stony Brook, Medford, Lindenhurst. So those are all communities where there have been big price jumps, also big jumps in in the number of sales. And what we found in that is that in those communities, real estate agents told us that people are looking for spacious houses. They want lots of rooms. They're not looking for the great room and the open floor plan anymore. They want lots of little rooms where they can have a little home office, a little, remote schooling room. And they're also looking for walkable communities and things to do outside, parks, places where people can go for walks along the water. And those are some of the things that are driving interest in Long Island communities these days.
Wow.
That makes sense.
To me, what is so interesting about the New York City move to Long Island thing, I worked in the city for quite a few years ago. And, the perception is when you're on the Long Island Railroad driving, it's going out toward the east and Long Island, it gets greener. So you have this sense that there's more recreation, and of course, maybe there is, but I think that the people in the city get much more exercise than we do. Because if you and I have to get a quart of milk, we jump in our car and drive someplace, get the milk, and come home. They walk.
Yes. And you find that if you're tracking your steps, anytime you're in the city, you find you get to 10,000 steps, no problem, right? It's harder when you're getting in your car all the time.
Exactly.
Different than just walking around the office building.
Yeah, it's just our perception, I guess. I mean, certainly the parks and opportunities we have out here, but I mean, the city has, decent stuff. My question, though, is New York in general, I mean, do we know we're losing population? I mean, people are retiring and moving out of the state.
I do know that for the folks who are living on Long Island and looking for more space, a lot of those people are looking down south. What real estate agents have been telling me is that a lot of people are looking at places like Florida and the Carolinas. And also a number of people have mentioned Tennessee to me recently. So it's, a lot of people are looking to move down south.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know when we did speak to Long Island Railroad Chairman Phil Eng recently, talking about not just the nature of people leaving the city, leaving the state and leaving the city, but the nature of people not taking Long Island Railroad anymore, and having that kind of equation in housing, where a lot of this was kind of the push was to move housing towards near train stations. But if people aren't doing that because they're working from home, then does it kind of undermine that whole effort, and does it need further reevaluation? So that's certainly interesting. There's a lot of, like you said, other factors from the pandemic that are certainly coming up, that might not have been considered originally. But maybe let's transition. I know we have a little more time with you, thankfully. And I know you had been reporting along with a lot of your colleagues on the very impressive and very important expose of LI Divided. And, knowing that, it's great, we had on Bob Herbert, I believe, earlier in when that first had come out. And we've spoken to a number of others.
Spoken with Keith Herbert?
Keith Herbert, I apologize. Yes, Keith Herbert, your colleague at Newsday, and a number of others who had a part in that whole process. And it's great to see him talk to legislators like Kevin Thomas, who turn that reporting into policy and help give homeowners the protection that are needed from these types of discrimination, FHA or otherwise. So I know recently you had reported, I think there were some additional. It looks like potential repercussions against a number of agents. So could you just kind of let our listeners know a little bit more about that update and where that stands?
Absolutely. So as you noted, back in 2019, around the end of 2019, Newsday published the Long Island Divided investigation into housing discrimination on Long Island. And what that report found after a 3-year investigation that involved sending in testers. So in other words, almost kind of like secret shoppers where one white home buyer and one person of color would consult real estate agents and see whether they were treated equally when they gave equivalent information about their, what kind of home they were looking for, what their qualifications were. And income. What we found, is that for Black home buyers, in 49% of cases, the Black home buyer was treated in ways that amounted to disparate treatment. So in other words, treatment that wasn't as favorable compared with white buyers. For Hispanic home buyers, it was 39%. For Asian home buyers, it was 19%. And what we did more recently was we checked to see, what's happening with these cases. And what we found is that the Department of State, now that's the state agency that licenses real estate agents, they have revoked the license of one real estate agent who was, included in the Long Island Divided investigation. And they also have moved to deny license renewals to 3 other agents. And there are 18 other agents whose licenses are at risk of being suspended or revoked by the Department of State. The Department of State is seeking to take further action against them. And then there are scores of other investigations that are underway. And what we found when we looked at the previous record is that looking just at housing discrimination cases, for 20 years prior to this, the Department of State had not actually revoked any licenses for housing discrimination violations. So this is something, it seems like there's a big change at the state level.
And we can safely assume that there were complaints.
You know what's interesting? So the issue is when someone consults a real estate agent and says, you know what, I'm looking for a home. Here's my budget. Here's my income. They don't necessarily know whether they're being treated the same as another person who comes in maybe right before them or right after them.
Yeah.
They don't really have any way of knowing that. How would you, right?
Exactly.
Unless someone is rude to your face, how on earth would you know? So actually, what we found is that when we looked at the number of complaints that were filed with the Department of State, let me pull up these numbers because I want to make sure that I give you the right information.
Of course. Much appreciated.
Sure. Okay.
And, we know, like you said, there had been, longstanding concerns of things like racial steering and the history of Long Island. But now seeing it in these color, that's what you said to Keith Herbert and to others, that it's in HD and you just see it and it's so compelling. And I know, a lot of national media picked up on it. And I know, you and your colleagues have won a number of, much deserved awards for this reporting. But like you said, I know you think you found that data, that point you were looking for?
Absolutely, yeah. So speaking to your question about how many complaints might have been received. So when you look at the number of complaints that the Department of State, that's the agency that licenses real estate agents, the number of complaints that they received about racial bias, if you look at more than 5-year span, going from 2016 through early this year, the state agency for all of New York received 4 complaints about racial discrimination in housing. 4 in more than 5 years. So what this speaks to is the fact that these complaints are not necessarily, what this tells us is that people first of all, don't necessarily know when they're facing housing bias, and maybe even if they are aware, it's not clear that they have known where to go to file the complaints. It's not clear also whether people really have the time and bandwidth to file these complaints. It's one thing if you're facing discrimination in employment. This is something that you're dealing with every day. It's in your face every day. If you're facing discrimination in housing, even if you're aware of it, probably at some point you're going to move on. You're going to buy a house or rent an apartment or whatever you're going to do. Your life is busy. You're busy moving. You're busy closing. You might not necessarily have the time to file these complaints.
Yeah. I'm stunned, though, that you say, 4.
Right.
That's wow. I mean, do people feel, could the other thing be is that, as a person of color going in a place like that this is just the way the world is.
Right.
We've been complaining about this for 100 years. So even if I have an agency to complain to, why bother?
Exactly. And what Elaine Gross of the Syosset-based group, Erase Racism said, she said that there has been a sense that complaints go to the state to die. That, there really is not much point in filing a complaint because, nothing will come of it. So that might feed into that. And also, just to give a full picture, there's another agency that handles civil rights complaints. It's called the Division of Human Rights. Now, over a period from 2016 through late 2019, they received 222 complaints about housing bias on Long Island. Of those, 4 out of 5 resulted in no particular financial settlement or other benefit to the plaintiff. So there is a sense that the complaint process has not been an effective way to address these issues. And what people who study housing discrimination say is that really the only effective way to do it is through testing. Essentially this secret shopper type program where you're sending folks in to test for housing bias.
Yeah. Because even to have a complaint and have a person that was in the situation, you still oftentimes it's a he said, she said kind of thing,
Right.
Well, I'm going to complain and they're going to say, no, this is the way it normally is. And nobody treated you differently. The whole industry is terrible. So don't feel like you're special. And,
Hearsay.
Yeah. It's
and
really, it is interesting because it's the perception of the complainer that, I'm just throwing it up against the wall and it's not going to go anyplace. And that can serve people who don't want to do anything about any of the issues,
And that's exactly what these folks who study housing discrimination say, that if you're relying on complaints from the public, you're just not going to catch these instances of bias. That if you're interested in stopping housing bias, what you have to do is you have to send in testers.
Yeah, well, I think the Newsday expose illustrated that perfectly.
Well,
four complaints in 5 years, and then you do this, and all of a sudden, all the mice come out of the building.
And they couldn't have been at a better, more important time. Knowing that, like we said, seeing what the market looks like now for homeowners. Thinking that I'm sure real estate agents, even who weren't doing anything wrong, they saw this piece, and they certainly maybe minded their kind of their practices a little bit closer, when we know it's important for homeowners to have an equal shot at getting a place if they are able to afford it. especially given the interest rates and things like that.
But you brought up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What a number of real estate agents have said to me is that they fully support, a number of real estate agents have told me that they fully support these testing programs, that they feel that it's very important for the market to function equally for everybody. And they want to make sure that all of the real estate agents operating in the market are obeying the law.
So do we kind of think that this is going to be a natural part of the real estate landscape, that the secret shoppers are going to be out there?
Well, it does take funding, and there's a proposal to add an additional fee onto real estate agents' license renewal applications, and that fee would go to fund these testing programs. It is expensive. It does take money.
Wow,
it does, but it's an important thing, knowing, like you said, the outcome.
And the other thing you brought up is, I'm sure you'll keep a watch on this. Is this a boom or a bust? If it keeps going the way it's going, I mean, a little, a tiny ranch house is going to be upwards of $2-3 million if we, hope. I don't know who will be living here when that happens, but if it did, So, but thank you very much.
And you know what, actually, there's one more interesting point along those lines. I have spoken with a number of real estate agents about how long they expect this boom to go on for. And what a few people have said to me is that they're thinking that there are a few things that will factor into that. One is, how long will this remote working ability continue? How long will people be able to continue to work remotely? If people can continue to work remotely, whether 5 days a week or most of the time, that is going to cause a lot more people to say, potentially, I'm going to move farther away from my workplace in order to get more space. But right now, people are not necessarily willing to put their homes on the market because they don't know where they'd want to move to next. So once there's more clarity about how much people will be able to work from home, that might cause people to decide whether or not to list their homes. And also, of course, as things get safer, as the virus rates, as the infection rates go down, you're going to find more people who might be willing to put their homes on the market. And once there's more supply, a lot of what's going on here is just, one real estate agent in our article about boomtowns compared this to the Furby craze. I don't know if you guys remember that craze.
That's a nice throwback.
People, fist fights were breaking out in the aisles. That there just weren't enough Furbies to go around. So a real estate agent compared this to the Furby craze. Once there's more supply, once there are more homes listed for sale, you're not going to find these kinds of areas.
Okay, that makes sense. So,
we want to thank you so much for coming on, and we want to thank Newsday, of course, as always. But we'll get you back, because this situation is going to be kind of flowing. It's not over.
Thank you, Bill and John, for having me.
You're
love to talk
certainly
to you
welcome.
Again.
Yep, we're happy to have you. And certainly we recommend all our listeners, again, as always, subscribe to Newsday, follow her work there with her colleagues. And I think if on social media, if you can follow you maybe either on Twitter or Instagram, certainly we recommend people do that as well. So thank you so much for your time, Maura.
Thank you very much.
Great rest of your weekend. Take care.
Thank you both so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks again. Be well.
You too.
Well, so John, I think the clock on the wall.
Yep, it's about that time. Even technical glitches and all, we managed to get through. So good stuff once again, as always, Bill.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Very informative. In any event, for our listening audience, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on 90.3 WHPC.